Well, we promised to go into more depth on Chelsea. Let's do that right now. They were the top spenders in the summer window, and they certainly look to be carrying on where they left off. We can speak now to sports broadcaster and Chelsea fan Rory Jennings. Good morning to you, Rory. Benoit Badiashile is going to have a medical today with Chelsea, ahead of a move from Monaco, about £35 million, we're told. Is that the type of player you need?
Yes, I think it is. Firstly, thank you for having me on. But yes, I think it is. I think it's the kind of player that we need for sure. You know, he's a very young player. He has a lot of experience. He's a French international. You know, he's been capped a couple of times already. So it's certainly the sort of player that we want. We desperately need to elevate our back line. Our back line is so shoddy, despite having had an awful lot of money spent on it. Even if you just use yesterday as a case study, the two worst players on the pitch were two Chelsea defenders, Cesar Azpilicueta and Kalidou Koulibaly. So we certainly do need to spend. We certainly do need to get it right. The problem, however, is that this just feels scattergun again. We're signing another player that can play on the left side when we signed a player, Mark Cucurella, for £63 million. And the reason that he was so expensive is because he could deputise both at left fullback and at left centre-half. So while I do think it's a good signing, why I'm minorly enthused by the signing, the lack of strategy is concerning.
Rory, you've listed a litany of issues that Chelsea need to address with this squad. What do you think the priority is for Graham Potter and Chelsea in terms of getting business done in this January transfer window?
Kweku, it just has to be the midfield. The midfield is so threadbare. You know, the lack of quality that we've brought in central midfield is so troubling. Like, not since Frank Lampard was manager. Prior to him actually managing for Chelsea, you know, in the summer before he signed, is when Mateo Kovacic made his move permanent. Not since then have we made a decisive move for a central midfielder. If you think of the last, say, 6 Chelsea midfielders that have come in, you're looking at Danny Drinkwater, Bakayoko, Kovacic, Jorginho, Saul and Zakaria. That is not anywhere near good enough. That is not the kind of recruitment policy that will allow Chelsea to compete at the very upper echelon that we certainly feel that we belong. So the midfield desperately needs reinforcing, and the lack of quality that's arrived since Kovacic in 2018 is a worry. We have to make this happen, and whether the answer is Enzo Fernandez, whether the answer is Declan Rice, we certainly need reinforcements in the midfield.
How's it going, Rory? Good to see you up nice and early in the morning. You spoke there about a lot of priorities there. What about a striker? Because I know you're not fond of the striking options that you do have. Goals are scarce. It hasn't worked for Aubameyang. Doesn't really work for Kai Havertz. I know you're a fond admirer of Erling Haaland. Do you need a striker of that sort of ilk?
Yeah, I think everybody appreciate that one, Flex. Thank you for getting that in. It took you a while. Yes, I think we desperately do need reinforcements up front. We don't have goals in our team. You know, we don't have any sort of threat. And I think that if you sort out your low block, if you defend well and resolutely and are prepared to bully Chelsea, you will succeed against us. Any away game is now a massive issue because we can't score. And Nkunku, that excites me, but I do think that we need more options because, look, Christian Pulisic, when he's playing for America during the World Cup, at various points, I watched him play 2 full games. I was in Qatar, and I thought he was the best player on the pitch on 2 occasions. Hakim Ziyech was a jewel in the crown of that World Cup, but they cannot replicate that form in the Premier League. So our forward-thinking options are so uninspiring. Like Kai Havertz, for me, just isn't the man. He is etched in Chelsea folklore forever, but he isn't good enough to play as a false 9. Aubameyang has just been a complete disaster. So yes, a striker is a huge necessity, but in terms of where we go and where we focus, I'm totally out of ideas, to be totally frank.
Totally out of ideas. It's a first transfer window for Graham Potter as head coach. How many windows does he need to turn this round? I say turn it round. What do you think?
Yeah, I think your terminology there was bang on. I think he does need to turn this round. Chelsea's form has been so poor. I mean, it's comparable to nothing that has happened in the past 2 decades, really. I mean, this is only comparable to the one anomaly, which was Jose Mourinho the year that he was sacked at 16th, I think 2015-16, when Chelsea ended up finishing 10th in the league. Apart from that blip, this hasn't been replicated for over 2 decades. So you are right to say turn it around. In terms of time, I think it would be very foolish for Chelsea to appoint a project manager, a manager that is going to take time to instill a very particular system and a very particular way of playing, and not give him a minimum of 2 summers. But that is almost a futile thing for me to say, because that is not how football works. I think that the standards that will be demanded by the board at Chelsea will insist that Chelsea are competing for the Champions League spots, let alone the title. Chelsea should be competing for the title. The fact that we are writing that off a mere 15 games into the season is an embarrassment. So I think that what will happen is Graham Potter will need to be backed. He's got this window. He has to get it right, and then he'll have next summer. And then I think people are very demanding indeed.
Rory, the panel and I are going to have a big discussion about players who are out of contract in the summer later on this hour. But at Chelsea, there's 3 big ones right there. N'Golo Kante, Jorginho, Thiago Silva. Out of those 3, who would you like to be given new contracts to?
2 out of the 3 I would love to get new contracts, and 1 I would happily see the back of. Jorginho, I don't think should be anywhere near Chelsea's midfield. You have to play such a particular way to accommodate him, and I just don't think he's good enough anymore. I just don't really like the style of play. It's so flaccid. It's so calm with Jorginho. I want excitement. I want Michael Essien. I want Frank Lampard. I want Michael Ballack. I want that enthusiasm and desperation and will to win. And Jorginho does not encompass any of that. N'Golo Kante I adore. There is certainly an emotional connection here. This may not necessarily be the most sensible thing for the club, but I would love N'Golo Kante to be given a new contract, because if we can nurture him back to full fitness, he will be one of the best players in the league next season. And Thiago Silva has been a revelation. I mean, he has genuinely been a revelation. I think if you ask most Chelsea fans to pick their best ever centre-half pairing, they will always say it's Ricardo Carvalho and John Terry. Nothing really comes close to that. But for me now, Thiago Silva has been so good, so committed, and such a great character to have around Chelsea. I think he is now in the conversation for that, despite only being at the club a couple of years. I think he's superb, so I'd certainly like to sign him up as well.
Rory, great to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
So a few issues there at Chelsea, according to Rory there, Kwaku. We asked him what Chelsea need the most. I think he said midfield, but then he'd also discussed about issues up front as well. What do Chelsea need to do?
So, we heard Graham Souness on Super Sunday talking about Chelsea's inability to score goals, and that's the hardest thing to do in football. But that's also the hardest player to recruit, a striker that scores so many goals. And if you look at the spirit that ran through Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank and Didier Drogba and Diego Costa, Chelsea have not had a striker that's banged in goals for them on a regular basis since Diego Costa. So the priority is for Chelsea, a player that can score goals on a regular basis. They've scored 20 Premier League goals. Erling Haaland, Rory's best friend, has scored more goals by himself this season in the Premier League. So the issue is clear at Stamford Bridge. What Chelsea need to bring in is whether they can find that player, because like Dave touched on, every team in the Premier League, it seems like, are looking for strikers. If you look at Leeds are looking for a striker, Southampton are looking for a striker. Chelsea have already brought in David Fofana from Mould, but he's a more long-term project, and possibly a replacement for Armando Broja, who's out for the season with an ACL injury. So there's a lot to do at Chelsea, but getting a player that can score goals on a regular basis is what they need to do if they want to challenge for those top 4 places.
Well, let's have a look at what they did. We have said that Chelsea were the biggest spenders in the summer. If you look at that, a total spend of not too far off, £300 million there. Sterling was taken in straight away. If you look at the defence, Koulibaly and Fofana and Cucurella, all defenders in there. And of course, they brought in Aubameyang as well. And a few youngsters out in there for the future as well. But big money spent from Chelsea in the summer. Will they be allowed to go again this month? We shall see.